Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. And this is another episode of our bi-weekly webinar. This is always educational. We're happy to have Dr. Temi Ajao today. She's a wife and a mother of two. She's also board certified in emergency medicine. She's a money mindset coach. She's an entrepreneur and a real estate investor, and we're very happy about that part of it. She hails from Bronx as a first-generation Nigerian American, and she completed her BA in psychology and Africana studies, then went on to earn a medical degree from the George Washington School of Medicine. She completed her residency at the Baylor College of Medicine. Her experience with burnout was largely due to financial stress, especially with the change from our employer going from being physician-owned to corporate-owned. And this is something we've all experienced in one way or the other. There was a great emphasis on RVU generation, patient satisfaction, quality metrics that largely did not affect patients' outcome. So after years of going through the motions and almost losing passion for the field of medicine, Dr. Temi decided it was time to make a change. So she reduced her clinical hours by negotiating for higher pay with local hospitals and started a locum career. So you're gonna have to teach me some techniques, how to do that. In addition to that, she decided to become more intimately in tune with her money mindset and started researching ways to go from a scarcity mindset to a success and abundance mindset. And I can tell you, coming from Nigeria, getting rid of that scarcity mindset is very difficult for me. And it's something I'm still working on. With these tools and her experience with career burnout, she developed the Money Mindset Academy, which is a coaching program that empowers women physicians specifically to understand and master their relationship with money so that they can double their net worth and build generational wealth without the stress, so they can practice medicine on their own terms. So we're actually very happy you're doing it mixed today. So we're very glad to get an insight into what the ladies are enjoying also. Okay, so and also I have my co-host, Dr. George Ozoude from Time Health Capital. We're gonna be moderating the event. So I'm gonna give it to Dr. Temi. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Temi.
All right, so I just want to thank you and George for inviting me to be on this platform. It's such an honor to be amongst all these elevated, educated people here and big time investors. So the goal of this talk really is to basically highlight what money mindset is and really understand it in a deeper level. Because I think a lot of the times people think that you just talk about mindset and say, do a couple of affirmations here and there, and then boom, that's all it's required in terms of changing your relationship with money. So I just wanted to highlight that a little bit, and then I'm just going to share my story, but let me go ahead and share my screen. Yeah, so basically, as Dr. Bayo was saying, so I hail from the Bronx, New York, and I completed my medical school at the George Washington University, and then I started my residency at Baylor College of Medicine. So my entire life, I was filled with rigid perfectionism, and I think that's most of us as physicians. We feel like we have to be perfect in every single thing that we do, especially with our finances. And so when I was in residency, the goal for me at the time was actually to do a global health fellowship. But I put those passions aside because at the time when I got out of residency, I was I think my student loan burden was about $450,000. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to pay this off. At that time in 2016, the PLSF program was the first batch that would have gotten the forgiveness was going to be 10 years later. So we weren't entirely sure where that whole program was going to go. And there was always talks of the government can always cut that off at any time. So I didn't want to take that risk. And so at that time, I remember reading The White Coat Investor and all of those physician blogs. And I just said, I'm going into community emergency medicine and I'll be making a pretty good salary. So I know that I can just work, and pay off my student debt. And so basically my mindset at that time was more of the Dave Ramsey approach, which was like, make sure you just pay down all your student debt. So that was what was my whole like focus at the time. And so when I got out into the community, when I first got out, so we were working with a physician-owned practice as 1099 employees. And as 1099s, basically you get your salary, and then you have to like now pay your own taxes, basically pay your own taxes and pay yourself a certain salary. And at that time we were paid biweekly. So most of the time we got our initial base salary, and then the second pay that we got was usually our RVU, which was based off of the number of patients that we saw. So when we first got out of residency, while we were physician-owned, money was good, right? We were getting upwards of 5-figure salaries every month, and RVU checks were usually about that same amount. And over time, the amount of patients that we needed to see started to slowly increase. So before, it used to be just 2 patients an hour. So that would be, for us, about 18 to 20 patients in a shift. And that was enough to make a pretty decent salary every month. Fast forward to about 3-4 years later, the group sold to a private equity firm, and they gave us a nice chunk of sign-on bonus to basically keep us quiet. And after that, I knew that there was probably going to be some changes. So early 2020, I remember working in the ER, and I got the notification that I got $500. And so I looked around and I started asking my colleagues in the physician community, talking about money for whatever reason is not like, people are not so open about talking about salaries. And so I was like, what was your RVU check? And they were a little bit hesitant, but then I was like, hey, look, I got $500. And then everyone looked around and was like, basically in shock. And so that's when I knew that private equity is coming in, and they're coming in to slash rates really quickly. The private equity group, they came in and they started slashing the rates. And so what happened at the time was that they started slashing the rates, and what was going on for me at the time in 2020, so in 2020, my daughter was about to be born in April of that year. So we're first line workers in the emergency department. So while everyone gets a chance to be at home during the shutdown, where people were dancing on TikTok and having a good time, we actually had to go in and be in the emergency department taking care of these patients. And they're dying left and right. And it was just like pretty horrible. And so what was going on was that when the shutdown happened, especially here in Houston, there weren't as many patients that were coming in, so there was not as much being generated. So at the time, that private equity group said, you know what we're going to do? Instead of furloughing some of the physicians, what we're going to do is end up just not paying you that RVU. So they just paid us our base salary. And then they said that once the volume started picking back up, that they would go ahead and give us that money back. And so at that time, I'm now seeing that there was some of our expenses that we had, which started slowly, gradually increasing, right? So it's like when we first got out, we ended up buying our home, right? It wasn't like we had any major lifestyle changes. It was just that we bought a home, and then we bought a nice car, and that was pretty much it. Other than that, we were just trying to be very rigid with our finances and maxing out the 401k, maxing out our 529 plan, and doing all of those things. But then it was becoming evident that the salary decrease that was going on wasn't matching up to the expenses. And at the time, it was just like, when I was working, I just felt like I was just working to pay Uncle Sam and working to pay bills. And in 2016, I was very much interested in being a real estate investor. I went on the Bigger Pockets. I was always researching YouTube University, really trying to figure out all the physician finances and blogs, doing all of that. And I was stuck in analysis paralysis for whatever reason. I would go see a home and then I just would stop. or I would go and read about something and decide that I was going to invest in a specific stock or index fund, and then I would stop. But behind that, there was this like scarcity feeling, like there's never going to be enough money. And all of that over time, with the work demands, with the financial constraints that were going on, especially with that earned income being slashed and not having any assets on the side or cash flow to come in, it basically all led to career burnout. And so what happened for me, this was the very day where I knew that I needed to make some changes in my life. So one day after a long shift, I had gone to Walmart to go shopping for the family. And I came back to the car and I started having really bad chest pain, like sweating, diaphoretic, hands were jittering, and shortness of breath. And I was like, oh God, so is this my time to go? Am I having a heart attack? What is going on? And so I actually had to call my husband to come and pick me up. And so imagine how that was. Like, I was like, I think we're actually going to need to go get checked out in the emergency department. And so by this point, I'm thinking, I hope there's no one I know that's going to be there. This is so embarrassing. The ER physician herself is in the emergency department. What is going on? I got there, luckily, they did the EKG, they did everything, and it was negative, right? It was just that I had a panic attack. And I never knew what a panic attack was. I was always somebody that didn't think about emotions. I always buried my emotions. I always had to be the strong Black woman, first generation. I was the oldest of my siblings. I took care of my siblings from the time I was 12 years old. So pretty much everything was always on my shoulder, right? But I think my body literally was like, something has to give, completely shut down. And then that's when I knew that there was some changes that needed to be made. And so that's when I started pivoting into money coaching and real estate investing. So I hired a business coach. So with this business coach, she was able to really help me talk about my emotions, which that was not something that I did at all. And then it made me really sit back and decide and think about, what is my relationship with money? Obviously, my mom, she was a single parent. She was able to raise us just fine on $30,000 a year. We always had food on the table. We always had everything that we needed as far as like the basics. So where was it coming from that as a high six-figure earner, I didn't think that I needed to take a break? I felt scared to take a break because I was like, oh my God, I need to make sure that my retirement savings is enough for us so that the whole family would be fine. Okay. So that period, I started reading a lot of different books. Obviously, Rich Dad Poor Dad was very influential in some of my pursuits of what's going on with my relationship with money. Of course, The Psychology of Money was also very instrumental, like really helps you see like the behaviors, the patterns, and the way that we think. And then basically what's passed down to us from our family influences the money decisions that we make. Then with being a money coach and being a physician entrepreneur, this book, Go for No, really talks about sales and how being a salesperson is not icky, it's more service oriented. And then of course, now that a real estate investor, I love Pace Morby, Wealth Without Cash. And he talks a lot about his relationship with money and what his parents taught him growing up. So what is money mindset? Money mindset, it refers to an individual's beliefs, attitudes, and thoughts about money and their financial situation. It shapes how you perceive money, your relationship with it, and your decisions that you make surrounding it. It can either be positive, it can be negative, and it impacts your ability to attract the money that you're looking for. David Klontz, he's one of the grandfathers in financial psychology. He coined the term money scripts, which is basically an inherited money mindset. So it's basically what your family taught you about money. And so when you're thinking about this, it's like, how were you raised when it comes to money? What did your parents teach you? Did they teach you that money is hard to come by? Or did they teach you that you just have to keep on working hard, go to school, be a doctor, engineer? That's the only thing in this life that's going to make you a successful person. Did they teach you about entrepreneurship, that it's okay to make some mistakes when it comes to money, or make you feel like it had to be a rigid process? Do you come from a family of spenders and savers? Obviously, there's always a combination of the two. With married people, usually spenders marry savers and vice versa. I think Dr. George and I, Dr. Bayo and I were talking about that earlier. And then what is your family's relationship with money? So these are all the questions that you have to ask yourself. And then how does that impact your financial decisions today? The influence of emotions on finances. So emotions, they play a very vital role in the decisions that we make. And a lot of the times, if we have some unresolved, like childhood trauma or emotional blocks, they can manifest themselves as people self-sabotaging themselves and have a fear of success. And a lot of this stuff is unconscious, like they're not purposely doing it. It's just that some people don't even have any awareness that they may have a money block. Some of that could be rooted in fear and anxiety, and that can lead to irrational financial decisions, avoiding risk, and feeling trapped in a scarcity mindset. Sometimes there's also some guilt and shame surrounding certain decisions that you may have made with money in the past. And then some people tie that to their self-worth. There's also, like we talked about too, there's maybe some emotional trauma or money trauma that has happened with a trusted individual who maybe you thought were. So some of the women that I have spoken to, they have been in relationships where they thought their spouse was taking care of some of the financial bills at the home, but they were not. And a lot of the women physicians end up becoming prey to other people's bad decision and money making, and now have to pay the consequences for some of those decisions. So these are 4 common money beliefs and money blocks. People can fall in either of these categories. So this was termed by Dr. David Klontz, but I formed my own little name to it because I just wanted something that's going to be easier to remember. So you have people that are vigilant savers. So these are the folks that hoard money, right? So these are people that are like misers. They don't want to let go of their money at all. A lot of the times, the underlying thing related to that is anxiety. They feel that money could be taken from them at any time. The rug could be pulled from them at any time. So when you're thinking about your investors, George and Bayo, sometimes they'll watch you for a very long time before they invest. Like they really want to make sure that their money is going to be safe. So these are some of the things to just think about as you're talking to potential investors and trying to get them into certain programs. Then you have money avoiders. So you have people that just don't even look at their finances at all. They're like, I don't have time for this. They believe money is bad. I like to call them the altruistic avoider. I don't need money. Somebody else can have it. I feel a lot of physicians fall into that category too, where it's, I don't need it. I'm just being super altruistic. I just want to help people, right? You hear people say that. And some of these investors, they may be hesitant to invest because they don't want to appear greedy. Venturous spenders. So these are the folks that place money on a pedestal. So typically with these folks, they are using it to fill a void. They feel like their self-worth is tied to money, right? So for them, money is never enough. They always need to get to the next income goal, the next net worth. Like it's just always in the pursuit of more and more. And that's just because inside they feel devoid of whatever it is. Then we have the money idolizers. So these are the folks who they want to have this external appearance of being rich, right? So they're wearing all the designer, the name brand, all of that. They want to feel accepted by their peers. These are the folks keeping up with the Joneses. They have the yacht, all of that stuff. But in the background, they're in so much debt. They have lost control because they're trying to keep up this appearance. And so these folks may just tell you, I don't even have any money to invest because they have so much liability. These are just some more money blocks to just go through. We don't really have to go through all of them, but we can just say there's some people, money is bad, and that's just grounded in the belief that, you know, anyone who makes money, rich folks, they're super bad, they're unhappy, and this leads to self-sabotage, right? Then we talked about these folks that say that money is not important, and they use that to rationalize poor financial decisions. Then, the other one is, if you're good, the universe will supply all your needs. This belief is prevalent among people in the helping professions and with strong religious backgrounds, right? So it's just this concept that money is evil. So here, this Klontz money script inventory. So if you Google this, you can actually take a little quiz and figure out which money script is yours. And then in terms of money blocks, the other thing that I like to think about in terms of money blocks is how does that relate to us as African-American investors, as people who come from marginalized groups, right? And so these are some of the systemic barriers to wealth building that we can also think about in addition to our own personal limitations with wealth building. So we can talk about the labor market discrimination. We can talk about the opportunities, the basically lack of opportunities to contribute to like innovation and investments in technology, as well as being entrepreneurs, right? Of course, we can also talk about the housing market discrimination, right? Where you see that, unfortunately, Black homes appreciate less in value than Caucasian homes. And of course, less land ownership. And if you're talking about slavery from Jim Crow down to basically economic disadvantages from today, these are all the reasons why sometimes it's a little bit more difficult for the African-American communities to gain wealth as well. So here's a graph that I saw here where I was like, this is interesting. So in 2010 to 2019, when you describe it as white households in which the heads of household were between age 55 to 64, in terms of the gifts and inheritance that they received, more Caucasian households received $101,000 as compared to Black Indigenous people of colors, $12,000. Median wealth, $189,000 for Caucasian households, and Black households, $24,000. So these are some of the things that we just have to think about in terms of, that's why I think that this platform is so phenomenal, because we're now learning how to build wealth in our communities. And it's very important to learn how to do this so that our children now are investors, they're inheriting money, they are able to not be in student loan debt and burden. Like, this is our time to like really advance our children in the future so that they don't have to go through some of the things that we've gone through. Okay, so if you have a money block, what are ways in which you can overcome this? So it's not like the death sentence if you have one. So one, what we think about in coaching is like we offer people compassion, forgiveness. We tell you, forgive yourself from certain money mistakes that you've made or for any sort of conflicts that you've had with individuals in the past, right? Then there's other techniques that you can use, which is emotional release techniques, where you touch your chest and just sit with anything that may be coming up for you, right? And then just releasing some of these trapped emotions and healing these past wounds. The other thing that you want to consider is replacing basically the negative associations with money with positive ones, and then being able to just celebrate small financial wins. So I'm a part of two masterminds. One is my business coach mastermind, and the other one is my real estate investing mastermind. And every time we meet, we talk about little small wins. It's like, how many sellers did you call today? If you called 5 of them, that's a big deal. What have you done towards your marketing? What have you done towards trying to do sales calls and talking to clients? We celebrate the small wins because our brain usually likes to present us with negative information vast majority of the day. And so we always have to remind ourselves and say the little small wins that we're doing every day. It's like you're presenting evidence to the jury, your brain, that things are going well, you're fine, you're right on track. Don't do the comparison. Like, you are where you need to be in your financial journey, and you're just replacing some of the old things that may have happened, any sort of money traumas that may have happened, with new ones. So with coaching, a lot of the times with coaching, what we do is we just offer suggestions and ask questions. We ask questions, we ask we are just allowing that person to get to their own answers as opposed to just bombarding them and feeding them information. It's like we ask certain questions that are tailored towards what they may be feeling in terms of their finances, and then allowing them to sit back and reflect on it. And then from there, they decide how they want to change their relationship with money. So I think we talked about some of these already. So yeah, basically doing some self-care, exercises, hobbies, spending time with loved ones, don't being so focused and tied down to money. Like also think of other things that are currency for you, like time currency, like just being able to just have that freedom to do other things other than just focus on being wealthy. Like what are other things that make you happy? So the other thing with coaching, right? So they call it the ego self, but in my mastermind, we call it our cave person. So it's just that primitive part of your brain that tries to keep you safe. And this primitive part of the brain usually sometimes can live in a victim mentality, maybe have a scarcity mindset, always sees mistakes, complains about everything, right? So we typically like to elevate the person to their higher self, where we're like, now, like here, let's take accountability to some of the results that you've seen in your life thus far. How can we change that? How can we move you from being a victim into being somebody who takes ownership of their finances? Going from scarcity to abundance, money is everywhere. It's not hard to come by. I can find money in anything that I do. Like that's one thing I love about real estate investors. Like the investors that I'm talking with, they don't see barriers to money. They're like, how do I find a private money lender and a hard money lender, all these people, and so I don't put any money in the deal, and then boom. So it's not a matter of, oh, I feel like I have to save in order to be able to invest. It's no, how do I find money and shuffle things around to make sure that I get this deal? And then this is the question that always you want to think about when you're talking to investors about certain deals and things that they can invest in. What if things don't work out? But what if they do? That's another thing. What if it actually does? We don't always have to feel like the rug could be pulled from under you at any time. Okay, so I just want to leave you with some of these thoughts here. If you were able to gain financial freedom a year from today, what would you be doing? Anybody want to answer?
I do.
Yeah.
This might be tell you myself a little bit. Probably practice medicine like 1 week a month, and spend the rest doing businesses and real estate, but not so time consuming, not to be able to take time away and enjoy with family. You know, I want to be able to do it in Paris. I want to be able to be in Paris for 3 weeks if I want to with family, and then still work from there.
Exactly. Anybody else want to go?
Yeah, I'm gonna pretty much agree with them. I'll be working. I feel like in the end of the day, we all have passion and purposes, and so that time freedom, that financial freedom, will allow you to devote more focus, energy, capital towards your passions and your purposes. And I think that's your next point there.
Yeah, that's my exactly.
I think if I could put something in too, I think that this is one of the things that kind of differentiates the medical profession. And this is true with nurses as well as I think doctors. These tend to be people that were passionate about this industry and stuff. And so they chase their passion. I think a lot of their financial frustrations come in the fact that they're already where they're passionate, but the industry doesn't allow them to get to where they want to be happy. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a ton of sense. And that's the thing. So when I look back to my personal statement from medical school, I'm like, I was very passionate about medicine, but I think like we're all seeing with private equity that's coming in and saying basically it's profit over patients, and you're being chased down about your patient satisfaction scores. I literally remember one time I was in the emergency department and they were telling us how our patient satisfaction scores weren't the greatest. And at this point, I'm like, I don't want to hear that anymore. But so I'm there. They have these suits that are coming down to basically teach us how to be more passionate to our patients and talk nicely to them and all this stuff. And I said, ma'am, just come with me real quickly. I have to intubate this patient. I don't have time to talk about this right now. So can you just stand over here in the corner? When I finish that, then we can talk about all the nice, pretty, how to be compassionate and all of that stuff. So it's just majority of us that go into this field, you don't go into medicine not to be compassionate for your patients. Like, it's a long road. And so I think that majority of us would actually do this work for free if we didn't have the student loan burden that we come out with typically, right? You're coming in with $500,000 of debt. It's a little difficult sometimes to now be not so stressed. So anyway, anybody else want to say what they would be doing?
I think I would be doing kind of the same thing. Definitely cut back on required clinical medicine, but pursue free time for me, I would like to travel a lot more. Definitely travel a lot more, see family a little bit more, and kind of like I said, use these talents in different ways to help people.
Exactly. And that's why when I started Money Mindset MD, and when I started, I think George was having a meeting, one of his meetings, and we just started connecting. And I was like, this is phenomenal. I love what you guys are doing, because I feel like once we're building that asset bucket and you have that cash flow that's just coming in every month, that stress is just not going to be there. And so if you decide to practice medicine now, you can do what Dr. Bayo said, once a week, twice a month, whatever it is. But at least it's like, I'm doing it and I'm not attached to the money. Like, I'm just doing it because of the love of the art, the medicine. Anyway, so for me, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So these are just some of the final concepts that I wanted to leave you with here. And then this is where you could find me. I'm all over. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Temi. That's a great talk. Such an important talk. I feel like it's the beginning of anyone's journey to financial freedom, is that change of your mindset.
Yes.
I feel like that is the most important first step. That allows you to start asking questions, being curious, thinking outside the box, and stepping out your comfort zone once you change your mindset about these things. I wanted to ask your thoughts on a huge impact for a lot of us on here, because we're medical providers, but the physician training impact on money mindset, meaning like the way we went through medical school and residency, which is like head down, bear the weight on your shoulders, don't really show weakness, don't really ask for help, heavy lift by yourself, and don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
Minimum first, do no harm, right?
Yes.
And that kind of trips you up when you start thinking about money mindset in the realm of investing or creating your own business. Just curious how you think about that.
I think it makes a lot of sense. So I think when I was saying earlier, like, I was already someone who buried my emotions, and you can't appear weak, right? So our medical training tells us that you can't appear weak. You can't talk about your emotions. Make sure that you just compartmentalize everything. So imagine when you're in one room and you're dealing with someone who's just had a cardiac arrest, they've expired, and then now you're telling that family member that they've died. And then now I have to go into the next room where I have to talk to a little 1-year-old or 2-year-old. So we're going from wild extremes. You never have time to truly process your emotions. And then if God forbid, you're going through something as a physician, mental health is not something that's really allowed or talked about, because you don't want to run the risk of any issues with your license if you ever have to say that, hey, I'm just not 100%, right? And so I think a lot of the times in our training, we're just supposed to be strong at all the times. And that's not human. And I think a lot of the times we take that into our finances too. I can do everything on my own. I'm perfect. And you find that once you actually are able to talk to other people and like mastermind with other people, network, and see that you're actually human and we all go through the same human emotions, that it's fine. It's actually okay. So if things aren't perfect and things aren't going well, that's fine too. If it is going well, even better. So it's just learning through that process and then realizing that like failing forward is still progress.
Yep.
I got a question.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for the talk. This was very educational, and I think it's important. It's something that affects even the best of us that are in medicine. But
yes,
couple of thoughts. One, I think a lot of us, if any one of us come from an immigrant background, you're usually plagued with the idea of scarcity mindset, which to some extent actually gets you through, it makes you adapt better in harder situations and get you through that when you see other people going through the same process. And that's something that I've experienced. But I think my question then becomes, when you elevate to the next level, you're an attending, you have a little bit more surplus, but you have a certain mindset that is very different from your significant other. They have a different mindset because they come from a different background. You have a different mindset. What are your thoughts on how you come to a middle ground? Because from experience, I've noticed it's a middle ground. I think it's a little bit more difficult to get one party to fall in line with the other person's thought process. There's got to be some form of a compromise, a middle ground, so to speak. Can you speak on that to kind of elaborate on how can at least a physician sort of get their spouse or onto the same page to make sure that they get the middle ground, that everybody gets what they want, but at the same time, everybody compromises?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question. And a lot of the times, like with marriages, like everyone, you have to know what your specific money mindset is, right? Like your relationship with money. And so typically, like I was saying earlier, the saver and the spender, they usually marry each other. And I think really understanding everyone's spending habits and saving habits and investing habits really helps. And actually having some of these conversations before getting married, I think also would help too. Now, but if you find yourself like where you guys are now figuring it out together, which that's what happened with my husband and I, we just had to respect each other's like spending habits and saving habits. So far as it's not like something that's super detrimental to the family. Someone is like overspending and spending past the family's budget. Like I think having the budget, like realizing like this is our financial plan, and then accepting that each other is you just are different, but having those conversations, maybe even having like weekly conversations or monthly like conversations just like you would have with your people and members of your team, or if like you're a business owner, you would have a business meeting, you would have financial meetings with your spouse, and just recognize that everyone's mindset is different. And then accepting that the mindset is different. I think what happens is when we try to drag each other to one side, it always becomes a little chaotic. But I think having those meetings, having the plan, and then hopefully everyone is sticking to what we've discussed would help. But it's tough. It's really tough. I think that's one of the reasons why I've obviously finances is like one of the leading causes of divorce in the households. But I think it's because people don't understand their money blocks.
How much of a barrier do you think it is that physicians work so hard to be so good at what it is that they do, that they gain a confidence level within that industry, and that now to step out and invest in something that may be something they're not as comfortable or not as confident about takes them off the edge? How do you address that insecurity section of it? And do you think the insecurity is a reason why doctors don't invest in real estate and other things as well?
Yeah. I think the insecurity is that we're plagued with this rigid perfectionism where we have to know everything. So you're stuck in analysis paralysis. You want to research, you want to do all the things on your own. And then you realize, at least for me, I was definitely that kind of person. And then when I realized it's okay to say, I don't know, like it's okay to say, I don't understand what you guys are talking about. And we don't get any financial education in medical school or residency. So we're starting from like intern year. And I think George always talks about that. We were interns, we had our senior residents, and then we had our attendings. So it's the same thing with your finances. Like you come in, you don't know anything, but network with the people that do, and don't be afraid to learn. And then, the more and more you learn, the more comfortable you'll become, and then you'll start to invest. I think what happens is we try to just do everything on our own. And then, especially if you come from like a scarcity mindset, or if you're like a vigilant saver, it's like you just don't, you rather just see the hundreds of thousands of dollars staying in a savings account as opposed to investing in and making that money work for you.
I'm gonna piggyback on that from another angle too. And this is something that I dealt with when I first came out in practice. Honestly, even before I came out of training, I felt we as physicians, healthcare providers, were targeted. And so I was extra defensive because I felt like all of a sudden there's a bunch of people that are just interested in me. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, you want to take me to dinner? Oh, okay. We go do this course over here in Vegas. Oh, okay. You start getting this defensive mode even. So you start avoiding. I was avoiding these. I didn't feel like I was well versed in that. I knew medicine. I knew orthopedics. I know finances. Why am I going to play in that world and get burned when I already feel like that world is out to get my money? Yeah. It actually holds you back, because what I think is more necessary is you need to lean into that, and you need to be able to tell who's real and who's not. And you're never going to do that if you avoid.
If you're avoiding. Yeah. That's true.
It's like practicing. It's like your practice makes perfect. So without practicing that muscle, you're never going to get stronger or better at analyzing, investing, just like anything else. Of course, don't jump in all the way blind. And I was going to address someone. George talks about being stuck in analysis paralysis, which is very common, right? So same thing 5 years ago when I bought my first eightplex, right? Now we have 851 units. So one thing is to know that if you didn't do the first one, you're not going to get to 800. It's never going to happen, ever. And eventually, that is also another reason why it's difficult for people to scale, to hire like employee, because you want to retain 100% of the power. You want to know everything. Control. So you don't, but eventually you need to be able to say 90% is okay. That's it, to just get to that mindset that 90% is fine. I'm going to try my best to get to 100, but we'll learn the rest of the way. Even with deals, I'm going to tell you, even as we sponsor deals, we'll analyze. And even when you send in that LOI, you always, George can tell. I'll still email George and everybody one more time. Take a look one more time. And it's going to be like, look, you're the CEO, just send it in. So that's what I'm just going to say. Just you don't have to just jump. You don't have to spend, you can start with 2 units, 1 unit. Start with something. Start with a friend. Yeah. you can share the loss.
One last question, just to play devil's advocate for a little bit. I know you're talking about scarcity mindset, almost from a negative connotation of how it holds you back. But just from your own standpoint, is there any benefit to adopting a scarcity mindset at any point in time, in your financial journey? Not as when you actually don't have. It's easy to adopt a scarcity mindset when you don't have the money. You don't have it. So you are you are not just in the mindset, you are in the reality of it. But sometimes, is it ever useful to use it when you actually do have, maybe because you're considering some upcoming events? Is scarcity mindset all bad? That's my point. Because I feel as though scarcity mindset actually has gotten me a little bit farther than I would have been even when I did have, because it frees up more capital to be able to invest versus spending it on things that really doesn't bring about more return other than joy of owning it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I see I think I see what you're talking about, in the sense that so I think on a small scale, so let's say you're going for a deal or something, and someone else doesn't know about the deal. Like Houston is a hot market, right? The minute you check if there's a good deal on the market, other people just scoop it up really quickly. So in terms of that, like if yeah, we're not saying just go out there and tell everybody about it, because then they'll take the deal like from you. But I'm just saying in terms of the overall like sharing of information, like being free with like your money, not being free with it, just being able to release it and not just hold on to it so tightly, I think helps in terms of like now being able to attract it back to you. But like when it comes to specific maybe deals that you have that personally that you're trying to attain, to a certain extent, yeah, not everyone should know about it until you lock it up under contract or something. But as far as like on a whole, I think it's good to share information. It's good to talk about like openly about physician salaries. One of my girlfriends at one of the local hospitals in Houston, she told me what was going on in their hospital about, I think the physicians like held out on signing like a new contract from a new private equity firm. And so with that, they were able to negotiate for more money. And then she's like, you need to come in here because they're offering bonuses and stuff. And so I was glad that she shared that information for me, because then I was able to enjoy some of these bonuses as well. So I feel like in terms of being open and free with information, I feel like it gets all of us further together as opposed to just keeping everything to yourself.
And I hear prioritization in what you were just describing. I don't know your name. I see you as iPhone, and you may call it scarcity mindset, but I hear values and prioritizing. So you'll reallocate capital into an investment over something that's going to provide immediate gratification because you've placed higher value on something. That's what I heard when you were describing that scenario.
Thank you, guys. That was helpful.
Chris has had his hand up, so I definitely want to touch and get his question. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, yeah. Actually, this is just going back to our comments about medical school, and it put me in the mindset of a recent lecture that we had about, and in the first Black hospital here in Columbus or whatever, and it was talking about how the individual there, they used to bring the new graduates under their wing to help them to open up their own practice. And I know it's a long story, but like, I'm just wondering what the role of our kind of employed mindset is in making us much more afraid of venturing out versus, say, 30 years ago when physicians were much more likely to go out and build their own practice. And if you have more of that mindset around, understanding the role of equity and what your true work value is. Because I feel like most of the time now, we're through med school and even through residency, we're just taught to just go get a job. Once you get that job mentality, it's hard to give up that W-2 to go venture forth into something. And I struggle with that myself. And I'm wondering if that is a real big part of that in terms of fear and stuff of the nature, because if you don't understand how that works and how that capital builds on the independent side, your default is to go to W-2 work. And once you get settled into W-2, it's a process to come out of that.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense too. It's also thinking about like your debt. Are you debt averse? Or what do you think about debt? Because some of the physicians that I speak with, they're like, I hate debt. I just hate debt. I don't want any debt. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Sometimes we got to think about debt, like certain debt in a certain way. And you can see that you can leverage this towards your practice, your real estate, whatever it is. But I think a lot of the times I have the student loan debt. I don't want to be bothered with another practice loan debt, and then they are not sure like what the revenue would be, like all the numbers, how to run a practice. And so it's just so much fear. But I think that model of having someone like a mentor that shows you the ropes is super important, because then that provides safety, because that's all people are looking for, is just safety around their money.
Thank you.
Okay, it's a 5:02.
Awesome.
And I really love the way this went.
Yeah.
It's very interactive. People feel free to talk. And so you're a very good coach, Dr. Temi. So I'd love to thank everyone for coming. And thanks for Dr. Temi for coming. I know we'll be talking more. Dr. Temi might actually be helping us out long-term at some point, but we're working on it.
Yes.
Because we don't want to just do investing as Time Health Capital and Dr. BDZ Capital. We really want to also form something around mindset and also not just discuss about invest, but some other human part of this also.
Exactly.
You know? So we're going to start doing that at least once a quarter. So get someone with something different. Okay, George, you have something else to add?
No, just want to echo the same things. Thank you, Temi, for coming on and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me.
Bye.
All right. Bye. Bye, everyone.